Shangyin, Untitled. The east wind whispers, fine rain begins. Beyond the lotus pool, faint sounds of thunder. Where the gold toad bites the lock, smoke from incense curls. Where the jade tiger holds the silken rope, the well hoist turns. Mistress Jia peeped through the curtain at young Secretary Han. Lady Fu bequeathed her pillow to the Prince of Wei. Spring hearts should not compete with blossoming flowers. For each inch of lover's yearning, an inch of ash. So we continue with Li Shanjing's heptasyllabic regulated poems, and this is a very typical representative of the poems of Li Shanjing in this section. It has its characteristic crypticness, a general subject matter that seems to be love, basically expressing the complications and suffering of a passionate love affair. And it's all, darkened, hidden away in a complex web of images and references and symbols that are not easy to decipher. They form a maze or a labyrinth of textual obscurities, which, as we've mentioned earlier, is one of the reasons why Li Shangjing has generally not fared too well with Western translators. He hasn't been liked. He hasn't been translated because he's just too difficult to translate. Perhaps a bit like Gongora, translating Gongora into English or other languages. So let's give it a try, nevertheless, with the help of, basically, as usual for Li Shangjing poems, with what I read in James J. Y. Liu's version of the poems of Li Shangjing. So as stated, this poem, the main subject matter is a love affair. It remains very unspecific, as the poem doesn't really explain much about the love affair, except for piling up images of tension, of danger, of insatisfaction, of frustration. So it seems to be a frustrating love affair, one in which communication with the beloved is hampered or cut down. So let's take a look at the poem couplet by couplet and see where it takes us. First couplet. The east wind whispers, fine rain begins. Beyond the lotus pool, faint sounds of thunder. So the first couplet gives us a natural background. Remember, in Chinese poetry, landscape imagery is most of the time not innocent. It's meant to act as an objective external correlate to the feelings, to the emotions of the poetic persona, or as a description through its symbolism of the main tone, the main topic of the poem. So here we have images of nature in spring, because we have the east wind. East wind is generally associated with spring, which is also associated with love and lovers. The east wind is whispering. Now, I think in James J. Y. Liu's translation it was blowing, not whispering. Fine rain begins, so it's raining. Rain comes with spring, but it can be a slightly ominous image, as it reflects difficulty in traveling, and also they're like tears of the sky, tears of the clouds. Beyond the lotus pool, faint sounds of thunder. And thunder rumbling is ominous. So the poem starts with these images of a spring landscape, but it's a slightly hostile spring landscape, one in which things do not seem inviting, but on the contrary, there are difficulties and there's this threatening rumble in the background. Second couplet, which is the first of the parallelistic ones, as you know. Referring to the parallelistic couplets, the second one makes a couple of luxurious objects its focus. Yeah? The third one, on the contrary, focuses on historical literary figures. So second one, where the gold toad bites the lock, smoke from incense curls. Where the Jade Tiger holds the silken rope, the well hoist turns. Now these are some famously obscure lines. Perhaps they may highlight the situations alluded to in lines 5 and 6. Who knows? So the gold toad, we have two luxurious objects, a gold toad and a jade tiger, which, are animals made of precious materials and are probably objects that are close or in the immediate space of the beloved, of the loved woman. In lots of these poems about women in secluded chambers, one of the stereotypes is to describe the luxuriousness of those closeted women by the luxurious objects, silk curtains, pieces of jewelry that surround them. And in these poems, you could say that the woman is like the top piece of jewelry, the top exquisitely valuable item amidst a setting of other valuable and courtly items. So here we have, as we say, a gold toad and a jade tiger. Now the gold toad is the most ambiguous one. What is the gold toad? Is it just a statue with the form of a toad? It says the gold toad bites the lock. Where the gold toad bites the lock, smoke from incense curls. So there's two ways of interpreting this, I think. So either the gold toad is a fancy lock, which means it's a lock that is closing the quarters, that is closing the door where the beloved one lies, so she cannot come out, she's trapped inside. Perhaps inside she has an incense burner, and the smoke, the exquisite fragrance, is locked inside, just as the beloved is locked inside her chambers and not accessible to the poetic persona. Another way is, another interpretation could make of the gold toad the incense burner. So the gold toad is an incense burner. Then it wouldn't be so clear why the incense burner is biting the lock. Perhaps there is a lock-like form structure in the incense burner and the smoke gets partially blocked. But anyway, the image would still seem to be hinting at this precious substance being kept inside. The fourth line is a little bit simpler. The jade tiger here seems to be very clearly a sort of ornamental pulley over a well. So where the jade tiger holds the silken rope, the well hoist turns. And this image is more dynamic. It's not a cloistered image like the previous one. It focuses on movement, so it's perhaps pointing at the possibility of an intermediary symbolized by this jade tiger who helps to turn the well hoist and who perhaps helps communication to take place, not necessarily physical one, between the poetic persona and the beloved. So in a very, very hermetic and dark way, this couplet seems to be pointing at the difficulties which the poetic persona is experiencing when trying to contact his beloved. Now, as I said before, the next couplet seems to highlight this with two historical exempla of lovers' difficulties, of difficulties in communication between loved ones. So, and this is also a parallelistic couplet, which is the third one. Mistress Jia peeped through the curtain at young Secretary Han. Lady Fu bequeathed her pillow to the Prince of Wei. So in both we have women, which are the beloved, doing things towards their loved men. So in the first one, Mistress Jia is peeping, looking through the curtain, and in the second one, Lady Fu is sending a pillow to the Prince of Wei. So in both we have an active female persona that is trying to establish a connection with their beloved. As for the references, so who is Mistress Jia? She was the daughter of Jiazhong of the Jin dynasty, and this Jiazhong was a prime minister, and his daughter peeped through the curtain at Secretary Han Shou, who was working for the prime minister, and an affair followed, which was later discovered by the father, who smelt her perfume on Han. And quite unusual for these stories, this one has a happy ending. So, it's just a historical reference from the Western Jin dynasty, which That's about the end of the 3rd century of our era. 270, 280, 290, 300. So we have this woman who was looking at the young secretary with whom she was falling in love and with whom she would carry an affair and later marry. Second line is a little bit more pessimistic. Lady Fu connects us with a period that is a little bit earlier, the Three Kingdoms. So Lady Fu was the wife of Cao Pi, who was the first emperor of the Wei dynasty, but legend says that she had fallen in love with Cao Pi's brother, the great poet Cao Ji, one of the greatest poems of the Jianan era. And again, the legend says that when she died, her husband, the widowed emperor, gave her pillow to his hated, or partially hated brother, Cao Ji. And Cao Ji had a vision which inspired him to compose a poem, one of his most famous poems, I think, which is the Goddess of the River Luo, and Luo Shenfu. And in that poem, Cao Shi was united with his beloved. So this, if the first story has a happy ending, the second story referenced, is a little bit sadder. That is, only after her death can Cao Shi dream of her through the intermediation of an item that belonged to the beloved lady. So you could say that those two historical images show us the heads and tails, the two possibilities of denouement for this apparent love affair that the poetic persona is having, and which is riddled with doubts and insecurities and difficulties of connecting with the beloved. So it's a representation more of the sufferings than of the enjoyments of a love affair. And finally, the last couplet. Spring hearts should not compete with blossoming flowers. For each inch of lover's yearning, an inch of ash. So the human lovers, can't compete with the spring love of flowers of eternal renewal, because human love, as opposed to the cyclical renewal of natural love, which is spring, is riddled with difficulties and contradictions and challenges and frustrations, with yearning and with ash. Ash being, the burnt remains of the passion of the lover, and the lover's frustrations and feelings end up turning into ash. So the poem ends on quite a downer, you could say, on quite a pessimistic note, or a complaint tone of this love affair only burns, only consumes me, but does not feed me or connect me with the happy renewal of spring and the more positive aspects of life. So quite a nice poem. I would say very representative both of Li Shangyin, his style, his subject matter, and of the late Tang poetry.